All right, guys, story time. So when I was a senior in high school, I got to work my dream job. I wasn't like more typical, totally respectable jobs. I wasn't pushing cars to the grocery store or working fast food. I wanted to be unique. I wanted to find something really cool that I would enjoy. So I applied around and I ended up landing this job at a small engine repair shop. I know that might sound a little weird, but here's what I did. Every day after school, I got off, I drove to this place, I went behind the counter, I pulled out tags, got a whole bunch of lawnmowers loaded onto a trailer, and then I just drove them around town dropping them off, all these repaired lawnmowers. And then I'd have the blank tags where I had to go pick stuff up. I literally got to drive a pickup for like 2 or 3 hours after school every day, and I got paid for it. It was awesome. But here's the thing is, I was working with like all adults, and a lot of adults who had been in this job for a long time and didn't necessarily have a lot of joy in their life. Also, a lot of adults who they swore. They swore a lot, like a lot, more than I had ever heard. And you know, I grew up fairly sheltered. I'll be the first to admit. You know, I was the Christian kid, Christian parents kind of thing, and to me, like swearing had never been something that I was like immersely exposed in ever before. And at first when I got on, I was like, oh my goodness, these guys swear so much. Like, who would ever do that? And after like 2 or 3 months, I started catching myself like dropping an F-bomb here and there, calling someone, you know, son of a, yeah, you can finish the sentence. Not to their faces, behind their backs, but it was like this just, I didn't know what was happening to me. By the time I quit the job, I would like developed almost this multi-personality thing. Like when I was at work, it was like I flipped the switch and all of a sudden I could swear like a sailor. And then when I was around my parents and my friends who, you know, would have straight up called me on that, I was, you know, good old Kevin, you know, normal, not swearing myself, you know? And it was crazy how much that affected me, how just being around something like that had such a negative effect on who I was and the way that I talked. Now, last week, we started this series where we're talking about input and output. What comes into us ultimately is what's going to come out of us. And we talked about the things that we see last week. This week, we're talking about the things that we hear. And just like when I was working at that small engine repair shop, I heard cursing all the time, and so that's what came out of me. So often, the things that we hear in our daily lives become the things that we say, the things that we think, the things that we vocalize. You know, sometimes it comes out just in our normal conversations. Sometimes it comes out when we're angry. But before I get too far into this, there's a couple Bible verses I wanted to read to you guys that I think just like hit the nail on the spot. So this first one, it's from 1 Corinthians 10. And it says, "You say, I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. You say, I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is beneficial." What the writer's getting at here is this idea that like, hey, if I do something wrong, like God's gonna forgive me. You know, he says that, like, there's no sin God can't forgive that he won't forgive if we like apologize to him and ask for his forgiveness. But it's saying like, hey, just because you can doesn't mean that it's good for you. Doesn't mean that it's gonna help you grow and help you become a better person. It's actually not going to, you know? The other verse I wanted to read you is from the book of Job, which is a cool book. I'm actually reading this one right now in my Bible reading. Job is spelled like job, so if that's ever confused you, that's what it is. The book in the Bible that looks like it says job, that's actually pronounced Job. So Job's this dude, he was super rich, he lost everything, and then all of his friends start coming to him and they give him some pretty bad advice. They start off at first being good friends, and then after about a day, they're like, well, maybe you sinned too much, and that's why you lost everything. And you know, and the worst thing about it is a lot of the times they said, this is a word that I got from God, that he's saying this to you. When in fact, they were straight-faced lying. Like, this isn't what God told them to say or nothing. And so this is one of Job's responses to something that they're saying. He says, the ear tests the words it hears, just as the mouth distinguishes between foods. I love that analogy. I love it so much, and here's why. If I eat something that is truly bad for me, like if I'm just opening the fridge, grabbing the pack of blueberries and popping it in my mouth, I know right away when I put a moldy blueberry in my mouth, because I taste that mold, I taste that texture, and immediately I know what it is. I'm like, get this, spit this out, get it out of my mouth, get this bad thing away from me right away. Our ears can detect things the same ways, but a lot of times we don't have that same reaction when we hear something that's bad for us. Last week I brought up this idea that, like the things that we take in, we have some tenacity, we have some just ability to like tune things out, and to, if I hear someone curse, that doesn't mean that I'm gonna start swearing like a sailor, but we also want to like kind of caution how much of that we take in. Like eating a brownie. I can eat a brownie and I'm fine. However, if my entire main course of dinner is a plate full of brownies, I'm not going to be fine. I'll have a lot of fun eating them in the moment. I'm going to have a bellyache afterwards. I'm going to get fat if I do that every single day. It's not going to be good. The same way as like, what we hear, if the only thing that we're bringing in is bad stuff. And I think swearing is maybe like too easy of an example to use sometimes. So we'll start there and we'll go further. Like if all you hear is swearing, eventually you're going to start swearing. I don't know anyone who has broken out of that, that they're able to hear swearing all the time and not give into it. But it goes deeper than that too. Because here's the thing, if all that you hear your friends talking about is gossip, probably going to gossip. You're going to start talking bad about people when they're not around. You might even spread lies about people. If all you hear are messages about, like you have to be a certain way, you have to look a certain way, and sometimes these even come as positive things like, oh man, you are successful and you have good grades and all this stuff like that, and like you start to internalize that, all these things are what make you a good person, but you don't measure up. The message that your brain's going to start getting is that you're not worth it. Like you're not worthy. You're not great. But when that's not reality, like God has made us all very valuable. If all that you're hearing over and over is like mean things, maybe it's bad jokes. I know for me in middle school, this was something that I didn't realize at the time, but that was tearing me apart. Me and my friends, our way of like talking to each other was just a lot of like making bad jokes about each other. And I'm not saying like cut out all friendly banter because that stuff is fun. And it is a good thing in relationships to be able to just like, kind of poke at each other a little bit. But hey, if that is all you're doing, if that's just a constant in your life, if every time that you talk, you can't help but put someone else down, or they can't help but put you down, that's not healthy at all. Because you're going to start internalizing those messages that were meant as jokes that weren't even taken seriously, because you're hearing them over and over. And the things that you put into your ears, things that you let yourself hear, become what you think about. Become what you think about yourself and what you think about the world, what you think about others. They become the things that you say. They become the things you say, not maybe at first to yourself, maybe to your closest friends, but then ultimately to everyone around you. So this week, I want you all to think about like, what are the things that you're hearing throughout your week? Go figure out in ways of like, what am I actually hearing on a regular basis? Truly listen. We're at the lunch table, like, what do you talk about each day? Maybe make a journal of it and just say like, hey, today we talked about so-and-so who just broke up with their boyfriend. Today, we made a whole bunch of jokes about each other. Today, we talked about something really good. And try to notice how many times the things that you're listening to are good. Because here's where we can flip the script. Is we can bring good things into our lives. We can hear positive things. We can intentionally get ourselves in the place where what we're listening to is good and makes us feel good, makes us better people. All right, so I've talked enough. you guys are going to go into your discussion groups now, and we got a few questions for you. So we want to hear your perspective on this, and be honest, because trust me, you're not going to say anything that leaders haven't heard before, we haven't thought before, and you might even be surprised that we were a lot like you. So as we go into these questions, feel free to just be real, be yourselves, and we want to hear from the real you today. All right, guys, have a great week. See you next week.